Dobro večer vam želim i dobrodošlicu na posljednji program drugog dana 4. internacionalnog festivala književnosti Bookstan. Hvala vam što nas neumorno pratite uprkos intenzitetu naših sadržaja. Večeras govorimo o romanu mladeži Arnona Grunberga, jednog od najznačajnijih holandskih autora. Riječ je o njegovom posljednjem dijelu i uvijek nam je drago što naše međunarodne, i ne samo njih, ali i međunarodne goste i gošće dočekujemo sa izdanjima njihovih knjiga na bosanskom jeziku u izdanju Bajbuka i što ih možemo i na taj način približiti bosansko-hercegovačkoj publici kako ne bi djelovalo da su ljudi samo došli i prošli kroz Sarajevo, a ne ostavili nekog dubljeg traga i mogućnost bolje komunikacije s domaćom publikom i njihovim dijelom. Razgovor sa našim dragim holandskim gostom vodit će naš dragi prijatelj Chris Keulemans, prijatelj Sarajeva, prijatelj Bookstana i Bajbuka i naravno jedan veliki i ozbiljni kulturni poslanik. Rekoh da je ovo posljednji program za večeras. Sutra nastavljamo u bašti Bajbuka u 11 sati kada predstavljamo izabrane pjesme naše rock pjesničke zvijezde bosansko-hercegovačkog autora Marka Tomaša. Hvala vam mnogo još jednom na dolasku i nadam se da se vidimo i sutra.
Thank you, Christina. And Arnon, every word she said is true, yeah?
Okay, I believe you.
Dobar večer, dame i gospodo. Good evening. So, we're here, special occasion. Bajbuk has presented Arnon Grunberg's 2016 novel Mladeži, and it shows how good, professional and fast Bajbuk is as a publisher. The book is not even out in English yet, but it's out in Bosnian. And I'm happy to have Arnon Grunberg here. Tonight we'll talk about suicide. We'll talk about vicious family relations. We'll talk about trauma. We'll talk about a lot of cheerful subjects. Arnon Grunberg burst onto the Dutch literary stage in 1995 with his debut novel. From then on, he has had an incredible production of novels, columns, travel reportages, theater plays, film scripts. It's impossible to keep up with the pace and the intensity and the depth of his work. There are days in the Netherlands that you cannot open a magazine or a paper or he's in it. He's all over the place. What makes it even more confusing is that he seems to be at 3-4 places across the world at the same time. He's in New York, Colombia, Kabul, Beirut, all at the same time. In the meantime, he gathers awards in the Dutch literary world. Not just once or twice, but 3 times, all the time, discouraging for other writers. But now he's here. We will talk about this novel, and we'll use the novel to talk about the themes that you present to the readers. I have a personal question to begin with. Are you a smoker?
No, I've never been a smoker. I briefly smoked when I was 15, menthol cigarettes, but I couldn't inhale. I found inhaling so terrible that I stopped smoking after a few months. And I just did it because my first love affair was, I wrote about it in my first novel, Blue Mondays, was with a girl named Rosie. And she smoked a lot. And I thought she would love me more if I would become a smoker as well. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, this didn't work out because after 6 or 7 months, she left me.
Because you couldn't inhale.
I couldn't inhale. Exactly. Because I couldn't inhale.
Yeah, it's a good reason. Yeah.
But of course, you asked me this because the main character in this novel, Kadoke, the psychiatrist, is smoking a lot.
He smokes as if his life depends upon it.
It's true. I did some. I like to do research for my novels. It's an important part of the writing process for me. And I did some. I wanted to write about a psychiatrist, so I spent some time first in 2013 in a psychiatric hospital in Belgium, where I lived for 2 weeks with the patients, and where I submitted myself to all kinds of therapies. And then in the summer of 2015, I was embedded. I walked along with a psychiatrist who his field was suicide prevention. And both in the hospital, but also there at the suicide prevention clinic, the Crisisdienst in Rotterdam, I noticed that so many of the doctors and the psychiatrists are smoking. And I asked them, why? I mean, come on. I mean, in the Netherlands it has become, and not only there, also in the US, where I've been living since 1995, smoking has become a taboo.
Yeah.
And then one of the psychiatrists said, and I found this answer quite insightful, we smoke because then at least we have something in common with the patients. It's a good excuse, but then I found, and really
did he mean the suicidal aspect of smoking?
I think a lot of the patients were smoking as well. Also, and later this psychiatrist who was present at the book launch of this book in the Netherlands in 2016 in a hospital, another hospital in Amsterdam, he then made a remark, even though it's my job to prevent people from committing suicide, I do believe that life is overrated. And I found it a pity that he said this only after I finished my novel, because otherwise, definitely I would have used this remark.
Yeah. Although this psychiatrist Kadoke struggles throughout the book with the question if life makes sense, if life is worth living. I'm a smoker. That's one of the reasons why I feel really at home in Sarajevo. My mother is 90, and she still doesn't know I smoke.
That's excellent. You're a bit like Kadoke, who is still... Yeah, I can identify with that. That's that you don't want to know your mother certain things about your life because you don't want to cause pain. Or you don't want to upset her. I guess that's the reason she doesn't know you're smoking. Yeah. Yes.
And Kadoke is taking care of his mother, who is old.
Yes.
In the book, he smokes all the time. He goes outside into the garden or into his car to smoke. But he has the advantage that his mother doesn't smell anymore. She has lost the how do you say, the possibility to smell.
Yeah. That's a big advantage. But I have to tell you, I know once I had a relationship with a woman. It lasted a couple of years, and only after everything was over, she told me that she was a smoker. But she thought that I would not like her habit of smoking cigarettes, so she concealed it for me. And I asked her, "How did you do this?" I said, "Oh, it's very just you chew on some chewing gum, you put on some more perfume. That's all." And but I was intrigued by the fact that there's so many possibilities to have a double life.
Yeah.
You can have a double life even, I mean, this also kind of double life you're having for your mother, or she was having for me. And it's not important. So this is one of the questions that's intriguing to me, not only as a novelist, but of course also as a private citizen, is why do we lie about unimportant things?
Because you understand why you lie about important things.
I hope I do. I hope I do, yes.
But why do we lie about unimportant things?
Out of shame. I guess shame is something that's an extremely powerful emotion, feeling. And also because you want to live up to the expectations of another person. Or you don't want to upset your mother, or this girl, this woman, apparently thought I would not like her as a smoker. But of course it was more upsetting to me to discover that she had been lying all those years. I would have accepted her as a smoker. And even though, this is quite important to me as well. I mean, you said, I feel at home in Sarajevo because you can smoke here. Even though I'm not a smoker, I have nothing against smokers. I don't mind if people... Of course, I mean, that's... When I grew up in Amsterdam in the 80s, I mean, if I after coming home from an evening in a bar, everything. I mean, you almost you smelled like an ashtray.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in some ways, it's an advantage that now you can go out without coming home as an ashtray. But still, I don't mind it. I'm used to it. So, what I wanted to say is that the choices I am making in my life doesn't mean that other people should make the same choices. Mm-hmm. I think this is quite an important thing.
Yeah. If you've read Tirza, for instance, which was also published by Book, you will see that throughout your novels, apart from the stories, which can be compelling, which can take you to most unexpected places, your novels are always punctuated by sentences that look like old wisdom about life, but they're the product of your very, very specific way of thinking about life, and they are phrased like statements. Throughout all your books, there are these statements about life.
But they're coming out of my characters, hopefully. Mm-hmm. At least that's what I try to do. Mm-hmm. And yes, I do like the aphorism. I do like.
Aphorism is a good word.
Yes.
Let's go back to this double life and to this character, the psychiatrist who tries to convince people in moments of crisis not to do it, not to commit suicide. At the same time, he has to take care of his old mother. And as often is the case in your work, your biography appears in the novels but transformed. Some of the facts can be related to your own biography. Many of the facts are fiction. To begin with, could you tell us a little bit about your own mother, who passed away a year before you wrote this book?
Yes, my mother, both my parents were born in Berlin, Germany, before the war. My parents were quite old. My mother was 44 when I was born. My father was already 59. And they were both German Jews. My mother came from a traditional but assimilated family. And she was on the last boat that left Germany in 1939. A famous boat. It became rather famous, the St. Louis. The boat was heading for Cuba. But Cuba closed the borders at the last moment. The US closed its borders, Canada. And then the refugees were sent back to Europe, and they were divided between Belgium, France, the UK, and the Netherlands. And my mother ended up with her parents and her niece and her aunt in the Netherlands. First in Rotterdam, Heiplaat, then Amsterdam, Lloyd Hotel, then Westerbork, Theresienstadt, Auschwitz, and then she was liberated in Mauthausen. Her parents were killed, and she came back after the war and met my father. And we discussed this briefly before, because we talked about migration, immigration. My parents they became somewhere in the 50s Dutch citizens, and I wasn't raised bilingual, my sister was, but among each other they spoke fairly often German, but I never felt completely at home in the Netherlands. They always felt like outsiders. Mm-hmm. Also because they even after everything that had happened during the war, they identified strongly with German culture and the language and habits. Yeah. Like one of the anecdotes I like to tell is that usually in the Netherlands at 4 p.m. coming home from school, you get tea and a cookie. But my mother always served she baked like pastries and all kinds of typically German, like Streuselkuchen, Käsekuchen, everything that's
Jewish things also?
I would say more German.
Yeah. Sure.
Like also, it's very. There's this distinction between the Jewish people that came from the East that spoke Yiddish and the more assimilated German Jewish people. Yeah. And of course, there's also a class distinction. And my parents both were very. It was stressed the fact that they really spoke German and not Yiddish.
We were talking about that, referring to Kader Abdollah, who was here with us tonight and last night. He was here on stage and he gave such a powerful performance. And one of the aspects was how he embraced even conquered his new country. Your parents were not like that. They were ambivalent towards the Netherlands throughout their lives. What was your relationship with your mother until the end?
That relationship changed over the years. I mean, as a child, I was really like I was very close to my mother. My sister was 8 years older. My mother was waiting for me, and it's interesting that you said that my parents didn't embrace the Netherlands. I think they expected me to do all those things. In a way, and this is a bit exaggerated, but in a way, I think they expected me to live their lives as well. They were unable to do it themselves. But when I was a teenager, my mother was a very powerful woman with a beautiful sense of humor, but she could also be she was overwhelming in many ways. And I had many fights. It was very hard for me to let go, to become my own person, to fulfill my own dreams and my own way of life. And I think this is one of the reasons that I decided to leave high school when I was 16, because I wanted to be an actor at that time. And I think I trampled the dreams of my parents, who expected me to be either a lawyer or a scientist. I guess my parents expected many things of me, and they wanted me to become like they wanted me to become a scientist. I believe so. Yeah. And I felt that if I would go to university, I would just live the life my parents wanted me to live, and I wanted to live another life.
Yeah. Is it also the reason why later in 95, something like that, you moved to New York?
No, that was more coincidence. I fell in love with a woman who was born in Yonkers, New York, a town not far from the city, New York. And she told me, don't fall in love with me, because I'm going to the US, back to the US in a few months. And I said to her, I think this is something you can only do when you're 22 or 23. No worries, I will follow you. And that's what I did.
Was she a smoker?
No, the only woman, this Marinka, that was the woman I talked about earlier. That's the only woman with whom I had a relationship who was really a smoker. Mm-hmm. Usually I tend to fall in love with people who don't smoke.
Or don't tell you.
Oh, don't tell me. Exactly.
Back to your mother. In the novel, the relationship between Karoke and his mother is very, very special. They love each other to death almost. They have a kind of unconditional love, physical. I mean, they're very physical with each other. They hug, they embrace, they kiss, they caress, they call each other sweet lovers' names. It seems like they are unable to live without each other. They're also unable to live with each other.
Yes, I think every love affair, every love is more complicated than we often think. But especially the relationship between a child and a parent is so complicated, because you cannot get a divorce. I mean, you can get a divorce. Everybody, you can leave your friend, you can leave your partner, but it's hard as a child to say to your parents, "You're not my parent anymore." Mm-hmm. I don't recommend it. I never felt I wanted to do it, even though there were times. Even though I remember after my first novel came out, it's the most autobiographical book I wrote, Blue Mondays. Mm-hmm. My mother sent me a letter that she was so upset about this novel that she considered me a dead son. I was not alive for her anymore. Huh. And then she changed her mind, of course, because she could say terrible things and then change her mind within a few hours or days. But still, this was a sign that how difficult it was also for my mother to have. It was difficult for me to have my mother as a mother, but it was not easy for my mother to have me as a son as well. Yeah. And when she fell ill in 2010, I realized that talking wouldn't do it anymore. So that's why what she needed was to be touched. Also because my father passed away many years before, nobody was touching her anymore, and I felt that she just needed to be embraced, to feel my hands on her shoulder, or to be kissed, and that talking about my life or talking about other things in general was often just too upsetting to her, or just she didn't have the energy for that. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons I put that in my book. That I do think that for the elderly, but also for other people, that it's not necessarily it's not sexual, but just not to be touched anymore is so awful.
I know that's true, and I think this works throughout the book. Could we give away that his mother, Kadoke's mother, is a special kind of mother?
Yeah, there is something with.
I think we could.
We can.
You will discover if you read the book, but
there is something.
You have the premiere tonight.
There were many reasons why I did this with the mother in this book, with the mother of Kadoke. The mother has a penis. The mother, and one of the caregivers discovers that she has a penis, and she's so upset about it. It was a scene I had great pleasure writing. The mother is the father who is so upset about the death of his wife. He has become so overwhelmed with. Basically, we can say he went into a depression, and the only way he could get himself out of it was by becoming his wife, by putting on her clothes, and by becoming basically the person who's not there anymore.
Yeah.
There are many reasons why I chose to do it, but the first idea, I mean, I was always very afraid. I thought the most terrible thing that could happen to anybody, to me also, was the demise of my mother. And when it happened in 2015, one evening, the first thought that came to my mind was not, well, the first thought was, I have a deadline tomorrow, because at that time I had a daily column for a newspaper, and I thought, whatever happens, I have to deliver my piece, because you have to be practical. Mother dead or not, that is also the way I was raised, by the way. And the second thought I was having was, now I have to become my own mother. So I thought there's a possibility to go through sorrow, to go through this grief by turning yourself into the person who is not there anymore. Yeah. And I was intrigued by this idea. And also I was intrigued by the idea that an elderly person changes gender. And not because he really feels that he is a woman, but he feels he as an act out of solidarity, as an act to deal with grief.
Act of love.
An act of love.
Yeah.
An act of great love. Yes.
So father becomes mother, speaks like his mother, acts like his mother, behaves like his mother, and has this, how would you call that, kind of torturous love with her son, because she needs him, she wants him, she expects many things of him. She needs him to take care of her, she needs him to touch her, but she's super critical. She's not nice to him.
Basically she's also extremely jealous. She's jealous she thinks that she's the only person that's able to love him.
Yeah.
I think this also, I mean, we underestimate also that a mother or a father can be jealous of the partner of his child. I think there is more jealousy involved in families and more competition than we are willing to admit. For the outside world, the family is always like a castle, or like almost an army unit. Like we are fighting, we are one, and we are against the other people outside. We are against the neighbors.
Yeah.
But in reality, of course, as soon as you have more than two people, there's always struggle for power, attention, for love, and it's not only something negative, because it prepares you for the world, it prepares you for what's going on elsewhere, but it makes things complicated, and I would say more complicated than often we are willing to admit. And yes, this mother in the book believes that her son is too weak to be, that her son is unable to live without her.
That is so cruel. It's so cruel to keep your child, who is an adult 42-year-old psychiatrist, good at his job. It's so cruel to diminish him all the time in order to keep him close.
Yes, but I'd like to defend her. It's extremely cruel, but it's also love. It's a combination of these two things, and I think cruelty doesn't prevent. It's not like the opposite of love. They can go hand in hand. They can go together very well.
Explain.
But that's. Well, I think we all. I mean, the moment we really love another person, whether it's a parent, a child, or a love object, a partner, we become possessive. It's inside us, and of course, it's a question how we deal with it. But it's there, deep inside us, and often it can become violent. Not always physical violent, but verbally violent.
Psychologically
of
violent.
Course, you don't want. It's very hard to let go. It's very hard to say to somebody you really love, "I love you," and I let go of you. Be your own person. Do whatever you want, because that's so threatening. And especially, I mean, I discovered this myself in my own family, but I've seen it around me as well. It's hard to let go. It's hard to accept that somebody doesn't need you anymore. Especially when you feel threatened by the idea of suddenly not being the mother figure anymore, or not being the father figure anymore. This is something I also wrote, but then in a very different way in my novel Tirza, which was published also in Bosnia. It's about a father who cannot let go of his daughter.
Yeah.
And a daughter who cannot let go of the father. So deep inside the family, I would say, there is something more violent by nature. It's not only in the families that are dysfunctional. It's in the family itself, in the structure of the family.
There's one way. I mean, Sting wrote the beautiful song, "If you love somebody, set them free." There's one way of doing that, of letting go of somebody. You let go, it hurts, it's impossible, but you let go. You can solve that by reinventing yourself, by becoming somebody new yourself. In a sense, that is what the father in the book is doing. He is reinventing himself. He transforms into the mother, and yet he still cannot let go.
You're saying something important. I would say that the transformation, that your identity is not made out of stone. You can become somebody else, is extremely important for a healthy relationship. One of the questions I asked when I was in this psychiatric hospital in Belgium in 2013 was, how would you define, what does it mean to be normal? And of course, one of the psychiatrists said, when I give you the symptoms of what it means to be normal, it will sound like an illness. Because it's a zone. It is not like, and what's normal for you is not normal for me. So we cannot. But one of the things that the patients here have in common is like they're not flexible anymore. They remain the same person, whatever the context is. And he said, and I found this a very intriguing remark. He said, to be sane means the ability to transform, to be flexible. The moment you go home, in the privacy of your house, you're a different person than you are at your work. So in a way, what he was saying is that the ability the double life maybe would sound too negative, but the ability to have different lives and to separate these lives is a sign of being sane, of being normal. At the moment you remain the same person wherever you go, you are not normal anymore. You are not capable of living in this world.
Normal then being the equivalent of being able to adapt, to communicate.
To a new situation, of course. That's one of I traveled with soldiers, Dutch, German and American soldiers. And one of the problems...
Explain a little bit.
I started doing like journalistic pieces. I'm a novelist, but I wanted to, and I wrote for newspapers columns about literature and about my private life, about many things. I wanted to do bigger journalistic pieces. And in 2006, the Dutch army was sent to Afghanistan, officially to do nation building, but as we all know, it was just a war. And I presented myself to the army, and I said, well, I'd like to go. I know journalists can travel with you. You have this concept of being embedded. I'd like to be embedded. And they said, well, you're not a journalist. And the newspaper I was working for at that time, NRC Handelsblad, said, you're not a war correspondent. It's too dangerous. You don't go there. We don't want you to go there. But I can be very stubborn, and I convinced both the army and the newspaper that I want to go there. And this was, I would say, it's a rather cliche word, but it was a life-changing experience, and I wanted to do it again. I didn't... It changed my way of what it meant to be a novelist. And of course, I brought this up because one of the problems soldiers facing coming back from the war is that they cannot adapt anymore to what we call normal society.
Yeah.
You're so used. I mean, when you're a soldier in a war zone, you must do things that you're not allowed to do in our normal society.
Yeah.
And suddenly, you come back, and this adaptation, the inability to adapt, is what some of the veterans. Is the sickness of the illness or the suffering of some of the veterans. It's the trauma. That you still believe you're in the war zone. You still believe there are snipers everywhere. You still believe you are threatened.
Yeah. I mean, this must sound familiar to many people here in the audience. The complexity of returning to so-called normal life.
It's extremely difficult, I would say, because also there is. I hate to say this, but of course there is something fascinating and something liberating, and something even, I would say, something addictive, as long as you don't get wounded or lose your life, about being in a war zone. Because suddenly life feels so intense. I remember the first time I was in Kandahar airfield, and we were told that the Taliban, the enemy, was shooting rockets at the camp. And the first time I survived the rockets, I never had the same experience, but I felt an incredible sense of happiness that surprised me, that overwhelmed me.
I think that was the moment that you wrote these two short, very fundamental lines. You said, "They want to kill me, so I exist."
Yes.
As a proof that you were actually somebody.
It's very strange to say, but yes, the moment somebody wants to kill you, you feel very, very alive. At least that was how I felt. And I've been back to war zones, and of course you get used to many things. And also to the suspense and to the ugliness. I had the same experience. I wanted to work in a slaughterhouse.
Wait.
Okay.
Maybe
we go too fast.
Yeah, because I'm not sure, but I can imagine there might be people who want to jump into this discussion at this moment right now. If you want to say or ask anything right now, you can also save it for later.
Keep going.
Yeah? Keep going. Okay, you worked.
For me, I mean, I did many things, sometimes more frivolous. I worked also in hotel as a chamberman. I cleaned rooms. But after the war and the psychiatry, and I thought it's good to go to a slaughterhouse, because also this is like a very existential thing. So I worked in 3 different slaughterhouses. I didn't do the killing myself, but I stood next to the killing, and I helped getting the skin out of the cows. And the first day in the slaughterhouse, I came home. Went back to my hotel. We had killed, I think, 20 goats. We killed goats and lambs and pigs. But it was a small slaughterhouse. It was not like an industrial thing. But I was overwhelmed with like a sexual energy and an aggression that really surprised me and made me afraid. But
afraid of yourself.
Yes. Yes. But the 6th or 7th day in the slaughterhouse, I got so used to it, to the blood, to the smell, to the act of killing, to see the act of killing, that it was gone already. So one of the things that surprised me, not only in the slaughterhouse, but also in different situations, and I think this is on the one hand very good, but on the other hand also like questionable, is how easy I think, not only I, but people in general, how easy we adapt. How easy we have a new normal. If this
is an age-old question.
It's a survival instinct.
Question for you within this context is: were you able to return to so-called civilized society?
Yes, I think so. But I do feel.
Or
I did feel for a while.
The addiction.
I did feel for a while that the need to go back all the time, and the need, yeah. But I do believe there is like this. We long for. In one of, I'm a great admirer of the South African writer Coetzee, and in one of his essays on Daniel Defoe, the author of Robinson Crusoe. He writes that just living through life, sliding through life, going easy through life is not enough. There is a longing for stories inside us, and this longing for stories is a longing for drama. And basically the longing for stories, that's what he is saying, and I found this very insightful, is also a tool for our self-destruction. So
it's
a tool for self-destruction. Inside the story,
tool for self-destruction.
There's a tool for self-destruction. Inside the story, there is something dangerous about telling stories about, and I don't want to glamorize it, not at all, but it is because we are all storytellers, but the stories we are telling ourselves about our lives, about our identities, about our friends, are potentially dangerous and are potentially destructive. That's what he is saying, and I believe this is true.
So take us through this thought, because so many times you hear about the value and the beauty of stories because the exact opposite, because they keep us alive, because they confirm our identity.
We need them, but they can be, of course, they're deep inside the history, the tradition of the novel. If you go back to Don Quixote, if you look at Emma Bovary, what happens to them? The Don, he read too many novels about how it is to be a knight, and he thought, I'd like to be a knight myself, and he became a knight, but he was delusional. He was fighting windmills, and he thought he was fighting against giants. And Emma Bovary has read too many romantic novels, and she believes that the true life, the real life, is not inside a marriage with this Charles Bovary, this brave, this rather dull but good man who owns a pharmacy, and she has a child with him. No, she wants a lover. Yeah. And how does it end? With her death and with many people devastated. And I think and Coetzee asks a very important question. He says, when is the Don Quixote better off? When he is cured from his delusion, from his fantasies, or when he's still inside the fantasy? Yeah. And he remarks that we would be poor, that we would have a life that's less fulfilled if we don't allow ourselves to live up to our fantasies, to be taken away by the stories we are reading or by the stories we are telling ourselves.
Even if we know that
there's this destruction, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Even if we know that smoking kills you.
This is a very small example, but yes, yes. So it's beyond reason. It's not about this rational thought, like, I know it's not good for me, I should not do it. No.
Let me go back one step, and then we'll return on this very serious road. You went embedded with the Dutch troops in Afghanistan in 2006. In
2007, yeah. And then in Iraq I was embedded, and it's a very different war and different army with the US Army. 2009, I was embedded in 2011 with the German Army in Afghanistan. And I returned to Afghanistan a few times as a citizen, not because I wanted to see the country also from the other side.
What did your mother think about this?
This is an interesting question, because my mother always told me, if you die, I will commit suicide. And I felt I could not take, in a way I felt liberated when she passed away. I thought, now I can die myself. But I didn't dare to tell her that I went to a war zone. So I lied. I told her I was going on a vacation somewhere far in Georgia, Tbilisi, and there was no mobile network, I said, and the phone was not working too well, so I couldn't call her. I had the habit of calling her every day. And sometimes later when she was ill, I called even twice a day. So I said, I cannot call you for these 10 days because I'm somewhere in the mountains of Georgia. I thought I had to lie in order to protect her.
Your mother didn't read your work?
Yeah, later, of course, she found out. Yes.
And then she was mad. Because
yes, but she
not only had you gone to a war zone, but you lied to her, and you did something that she said, if you do that, I will make an end to my life.
Yeah, dying. Yeah. Yes, she was mad, but she was also happy that I was still alive. It was mixed. And she begged me not to go there again, but then, of course, she knew me, and I'm as stubborn as she is. And I remember there was a party for one of my novels, and there was somebody that invited from the army, and then she asked this person, an officer, to promise her that I would come back alive again. So she was looking for like assurances that and I also I said, they won't let me die. This is really like bad publicity for the army. I told her this is not going to happen. And in a way, I mean, we should not exaggerate the risk. Of course, there are always risks, but there are also risks when you're on a highway. And there's one more anecdote that was very important to me. The second time I was with the Dutch army in Afghanistan, we went out to hand out flyers. A completely absurd thing, but we did. We had to do it. And there was a threat of that there was a suicide. There was a threat of a suicide attack. And we went out of the armored vehicles. And I was walking with an officer, I think captain. And then we had walked about maybe 10 meters, 20 meters, and suddenly he said, "You know what? I don't need my big gun. If something happens, it's a bomb. But why would I leave it in a car? It's beyond our control. It's inshallah." And this was a big relief because I felt there's nothing I can do wrong. It's like we should be lucky.
Yeah.
We should expect to be lucky.
Yeah.
And when I was alone in Iraq, for example, in 2008, I felt much more afraid because I felt I can make mistakes myself. I can go with the wrong people, I can make decisions, I can be abducted. And also there was one more, and then I met in Afghanistan an UK journalist and he had been to all kinds of war zones, and I was new, and he was a bit arrogant, but also he wanted to help me. And he told me, "Arnon, we all have to die. Getting killed is not that bad, believe me. But don't get kidnapped, because that's awful for you and for your family. Don't get kidnapped."
Yeah.
And that was always in my mind.
Yeah.
Dying is okay, but getting kidnapped is really the worst.
It's a little bit, Kader Abdollah, like the young revolutionaries in your book who were always prepared to be caught by the police, by the Secret Service, by the Islamic police, and they knew if they catch me, I'll take this pill, I'll kill myself in order not to speak.
But of course I didn't have that pill. I mean,
No.
but it was something that was in the back of my head. Yes, definitely. And also, I mean, it sounds very heavy, but being among soldiers or being in a war, I mean, there's nothing new. I'm telling the people here, there's an enormous sense of humor as well, and there's an enormous sense of erotic energy, and people are starting affairs, and people are, even though it's not allowed, the Dutch army is not allowed to have booze, whereas, for example, the UK army, they can drink when they are in a war zone. One of the UK officers told me, if we don't allow the soldiers to have a beer, they become too aggressive. I found it quite hilarious. But so of course they smuggle in drink and they do all kinds of things that they're not supposed to do. So it's also a sense there's a sense of community, which is.
Before we get to the community,
yes,
because there's an undercurrent in everything you're talking about now. About storytelling as a tool of self-destruction. There's about your mother, about karaoke, about your own experiences in war zones. There is this undercurrent of, how do you say it, gambling with death, or the desire to stop living.
No, I'm not suicidal, but I do think that that one of the greatest dangers to our societies is the idea that you can go through life without taking risks. That we expect that too many people, especially I would say in the US or in the Netherlands, I don't know about this society, that expect that's like the government or somebody else can guarantee a completely risk-free life, that you're entitled to it. And I think this is a danger to life itself, but also it makes people less prepared for what can happen to them.
This is almost literally what Aminata Forna, who is also in this festival, is going to talk about at least tomorrow afternoon when we're going to share the stage here. This is literally in her recent book, Happiness. Sure, but to return to this book, Kadoke, as the novel progresses, is questioning himself more and more. Should I stay alive? Is life anything more than just not dying? Is it?
Also, of course, because he is in the suicide prevention, and
Yeah,
he meets this woman. I mean,
exactly.
he makes a mistake. So he makes a few mistakes, I would say. He starts an affair with a caretaker of his mother, but also he makes a mistake with one patient who convinces him that this man is not going to commit suicide, and the next day he commits suicide. And he takes it very personal, which is something a psychiatrist should not do. And then he goes to a young woman, and he doesn't want to make the mistake again. He wants to, for one reason or another, he wants to keep her alive. He takes her life very personal. And by doing this, he crosses borders. He becomes transgressive. I think I would defend him. I think he does it for her. But of course he asks himself whether why is suicide a bad thing? Of course he is not sure about it at certain points.
And
But no, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I think, but in the end, of course, he believes, and I that's also something I believe, that suicide is not a medicine.
No, and even let me check. You he even says something very typically Grunberg about suicide. He says, I can't find it immediately.
Maybe later.
Yeah. I can't find it. In this specific case, in this family, this mother and son, the mother who has survived as a young girl Auschwitz, like your own mother did, Kadoke says something very dark at a certain moment. He says he feels he was born too late to be gassed, to be killed by gas in the camps. That is his defeat. He does not want himself to exist. That he is there nonetheless is because he cannot make his parents suffer by not being there. No love in the world can conquer the sensation of not allowing yourself to be alive. So he carries the sense all his life, throughout his life, that he actually doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to be alive.
Yes. He doesn't. There is this sense. There is this desire of not being, and at the same time, he feels strongly that he cannot. That he has to exist. That it is a duty, given the history of his parents. Yes. This may sound more dramatic than I wanted it to sound when I wrote the novel, but I do think it's a fight deep inside this man, and I recognize this fight in a way.
You might not put it in the same words for yourself, but you recognize.
Yes, I can have feelings of sympathy for it. Yeah, I do believe that I would, for me personally, and also I consider myself, even though I like melancholy from time to time, I consider myself a fairly happy person for various reasons. For me, suicide is out of the question. It would be like an immense betrayal of my parents, and I feel a sense of solidarity with them, even though they're not alive anymore. So this is something I would never be willing or be able to do.
No. But it relates to the trauma they carry.
Of course, yeah.
Survivors. And trauma is a question I want to discuss with you as well. Karoke feels the pressure of the trauma throughout, of course, his life with his parents. Same like you undoubtedly have experienced. How do you think a family, parents and children, can deal with trauma?
That's a difficult question, especially because it's, I think every family, there's not like a general answer to this question. But if you force me to give a general answer, I would say the first, and I think also this is something that Karoke is saying in the book, more or less, is by acknowledging that the trauma is there. And also by acknowledging that it's not only something negative. That it doesn't only... I would never consider myself, never, a victim. And
Do
so
you
you
consider yourself like a second generation?
I hate that word.
Mhm.
Yes, officially, of course, I am, but I hate that word. I think even a difficult history can, of course, it can wound you. It can cause wounds, but it can also make you stronger. It can also give you something. It doesn't take away. It doesn't only take away. It can also give you something. It can also make. Thanks to my parents and thanks also to the history, this is who I became. This is also the author who I became. And I think the trauma is not only something negative. It's part of your life history, it's part of your narrative, but it depends on how you deal with it. It depends on, I think if it's important to learn how to play with your own pain and with your own traumatic experiences, and to be able to say, oh, it's there, but I'm here. We are not exactly in the same place. You can disconnect from it a bit.
Yeah.
You have to disconnect sometimes in order to be a happy person.
You cannot
to be
reduce yourself to the trauma.
No, exactly, exactly. That's the right word, reduce. You should never allow yourself to be reduced to that.
Yeah. One of the aphorisms in the book is je moet het trauma voortzetten. I don't know how you would translate that best into English.
We have to continue the trauma, and also I'm
to carry it on.
To carry it on, to give it. Maybe it's not that. That's more paraphrasing it. To give it to the next generation. But also I'm saying this in the book because I believe that the European culture has been traumatized after what happened, not only because of fascism, but also because of Stalinism, because of everything that happened in the last century. You cannot deny that's there. And that many of the problems we are facing now are connected to that history. You cannot disconnect from the history. I think that's the biggest mistake we can make.
So not deny trauma, not...
And accept that's part of the culture. That's deep inside the culture. That the culture itself, European culture, is wounded, has been wounded, and it's not healed yet. And we cannot expect it to heal in a few decades after the disasters of 2 world wars and
wars like the one
and worse
that
what happened here. Yeah.
Earlier we were talking about family as a small nucleus community. Do you have thoughts about how communities can deal with trauma? If it is part of the culture, if it is part of the history?
There's a danger, of course. I mean, there's a danger that if a community turns the traumatic experience into a narrative, into a into something that builds identity, there is this danger that the traumatic experience becomes a story about an enemy. And it becomes like an excuse for aggression.
Revenge.
Too often. Revenge or We have an enemy. The big danger, the danger of communities and the danger of identity itself is, of course, that how can you build an identity, how can you construct an identity without constructing an image of an enemy that has to be defeated?
Yeah.
And I myself, I like to be this loner. I like to be an outsider. I don't mind being an outsider, and I strongly believe that whether it's that accepting your own solitude is not only a way of becoming a happier person, but also of becoming a better person with other people, because you don't expect other people, whether it's your love object or whether it's a community, to solve your loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that other people may have a need of more community, and I accept it wholeheartedly, and there's nothing wrong with it. But there is this danger that a community, whether it's is connected to a nation state or other sorts of community, can only exist with the threat of an enemy that has to be defeated. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great danger to all our societies and to human beings.
It resonates here too, of course. Some of my friends here in Sarajevo, in Bosnia, describe the country today as a traumatized nation. Impossible question. But how to carry on as a traumatized nation, as a national community?
The question then is how do you define the community? Mm-hmm. And whether, when I arrived here on Tuesday, I asked the question, I think the last time I was here was in 2012 or 13, I'm not sure, but I asked the question, how are things going? And the answer I was getting was that the ghost of the Dayton Accords is still haunting this part of the world. So given these ghosts, the question is, is a nation state not a very outdated model for solving problems regarding community? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is not only a question for people in Bosnia, but I would say also for the Netherlands, where you see also a fight. What does it mean to be Dutch? Yeah. What does it mean? How important is the Netherlands? And do we really think, I don't, completely the opposite. Do we really think that Brussels is the enemy? Do we really think that we have to get out of the European community in order to become like an independent state? Brexit. Well, we have seen what's happening there, so I don't think it's like
collective suicide.
Yeah, in a way. So I do believe that, of course, we need communities, but a community we can have communities without having a state. I think this is really like an outdated model.
We can have a community.
Of course, we all need
without being a state.
Maybe it sounds here too utopian, but I do believe that this is the only way forward. Yeah. I think nationalism outside the football stadium or outside sport will always become a destructive force. Mm-hmm. Because nationalism needs an enemy. Yeah. There's no nationalism without an enemy.
So larger communities that have gone through terror, loss and destruction, you're saying the danger is that they solidify, that they collect themselves around the trauma, about the memory, around the memory of...
That I cannot, on the one hand, I said that you have to acknowledge the trauma and to acknowledge the past and to do truth finding. I think that was one of the great things that happened in South Africa, was like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Of course, what happened afterwards didn't work out that well, but still, this was a great and important thing. But I do think that at a certain point also there, you have to let go. You cannot be stuck in the past. Yeah. You cannot say this is the only thing we are focusing on and we are seeing nothing else. In a way, even if you're wounded, it's the same, of course, with grief after you lose somebody, whether it's death or whether somebody's leaving you. You cannot stuck in this grief for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. It's unhealthy. So you have to move on. Yeah. And this is all,
Reinvent yourself as we discussed before.
I love the word.
Transform yourself.
I think the word reinventing is so beautiful because yes, that's I think what we are supposed to do all the time, and this is something we should not be afraid of. One of the things we are seeing not only here but even in the US, I mean Europe, is that some people are so afraid of reinventing themselves that they believe in a mythical past that supposedly was much better than we are having now, and that they want to go back to that past. Whereas I believe this is like a completely fake past that didn't exist, and the fear is just a fear for a certain amount of change.
It's true in the US, in the Netherlands.
Yeah,
It could
and
be
of course,
true here.
I'm not saying that this fear is. I don't understand it, but I do believe that it is that it is a destructive force. And again, there we are touching on the question: how many risks do we allow ourselves, and do we really believe we can go through life without taking risks, or with the guarantee that we can stay the same for the rest of our lives? I think if you really look at history, the answer must be no. The answer must be you must be prepared that you have to change, that you have to move, that you have to. What was the word? Reinvent yourself. Yes. And this can be also a very positive thing, as Kader Abdullah said yesterday.
Who had to?
Yeah, to turn the necessity into something, into a virtue.
Yeah.
Or at least into something that's not only negative, that's not only a loss, but also gain.
Which is also workable, something you can work on, instead of being paralyzed and stuck.
Yeah, instead of being paralyzed and stuck. I think maybe there's also this being paralyzed can also become addictive. Your pain can become addictive. Suddenly your pain is part of your identity. And then the question is, who am I without the pain, without this feeling of being traumatized? It can feel like there's an emptiness. I've seen it in my own environment. But I do believe that this feeling of being paralyzed is an enemy of happiness, and an enemy. Also, you don't see the possibilities anymore that are there. One of the things I liked about going to the war zones, or going to a slaughterhouse, or going to a psychiatric hospital, is that the moment you are there, it's not about me anymore. It's about the other people. I'm there. I really want to know something about the other people.
Yeah.
And that's so liberating.
Yeah.
And it forces you to, in a way, to reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
Because you see, hey, this is also, I can be friends with soldiers. I thought I never went to the army, although there was still a draft when I was 18. But I can be part of an army. Or part, I never. But I can live there. There's so many places where I can live.
Yeah.
There's so many. I can adapt myself, and I can find people whom I like. Even in environments I thought I would never find a person with whom I can have a decent conversation. So you are always surprised. The moment you talk with a person you consider your greatest enemy, you see you have so many things in common. I went to Lebanon and I spoke with people of Hezbollah, and we had a great time. Even I remember I did a big project about religion in the US, and I spoke to a preacher. He was just denied entrance into the Netherlands, Mr. Anderson, and he hated Jewish people, Catholic people. He hated everything. He hated me, but he didn't know I was Jewish. And I had a conversation with him, and I saw his daughter sitting next to him. And of course, in a way, he might be a monster. He might be called a monster. He has he has opinions that I despise, and that I think many people should despise. But I could also see how close he is to who I am. So the moment you see the monster, the enemy, is so much like you, the whole idea of having this big enemy, this with whom you have nothing in common, disappears.
Yeah. Are you being hopeful now? Are you giving us hope?
Yes, in a way, yes. I mean, I'm surprised that I answer this question with yes. But I do believe that there's so many people that this whole idea that we live in the worst of times, that we live in the apocalyptic times, that the world is coming to an end, is just not true. If you look at history, if you look at other places in the world, I mean, there's so many places where you really would not want to live. And there's so many things that are worth keeping and are worth preventing from destruction.
Worth living for.
Yes, in a way, yes. So yes, of course. I mean, hope itself can be dangerous, but it's not. I just pessimism, just thinking this is the end of the times, and we are going with the climate change, whatever dangers we are seeing. I think you need, in order to go through life, you need a certain amount of naive trust. Whether it's in your private life or whether it's for community or for all of mankind. And I think this is what I would consider the hope, that you even that there's no reason, that you cannot find the reason for this hope. You must admit that you need it. It's another way of saying that you cannot go through life without a certain amount of illusions.
Yeah.
And I think this is what we should allow ourselves.
Yeah.
And this whole idea that it's only black and only negative and only that we're all going to hell, this is feeding like extremism. This is feeding despair. And a kind of despair that can turn easily into violence.
And destruction and self-destruction. When you read this novel later, bear in mind what ARNON GRUNBERG said here, because you will not believe that the author of this book has been telling us what he's telling us today.
And also, I mean, we had a very serious conversation, which is very good, but the novel is also, I would say, sometimes quite funny.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Totally. And you are very, very often very funny, but somehow tonight we went into very serious questions. Again, I would like to invite you to respond. There are mics around, if necessary. Here on the front row here. And please introduce yourself when you get the mic. No, here.
I'm Senadin Musabegovic and also writer and professor. You said something that we need some sense self-destruction. But why we need self-destruction? Maybe we hope that we will have some sort of transformation, that we will change ourselves. Always when we think that we can change ourselves, we hope, we want to pass through the self-destruction. For example, if you have a relation with your mother, through the self-destruction, you can believe that you can transform your relation with your mother, or something, you can go far away from her, or you can return to her. But what's happened usually, that you didn't do anything of this. You didn't go far away, you didn't return. But always what you do is to repeat this self-destruction, instead to find solution. That is the problem, I think. And I think always we believe in some sort of transformation. We want to be better. We want to find something new. And this is the reason of self-destruction. It's not just like, you know.
No,
and I want just to mention something which is for me very interesting. You said, maybe when you are a soldier, I was also a soldier for 3 years. You said, you know, I would like to be a prisoner, I would like to kill myself, but it is for me, I discovered something very, very deep in my body, that I would do everything to survive. They can capture me, they can torture me, but I won't survive, because I didn't have another chance. Maybe you can go in your home, you know? I cannot go. I just want to survive. And we cannot, it is just, you know, it is a complicated question. And also another things, sorry. This is, the biggest trauma is when we are born. This is the moment of the trauma. Of course, when we start to exist, this is a trauma. And what we need to do, it is to transform the trauma in something creative forces. This is the problem what's happened in Bosnia. We need to transform everything what's happened here during the war in something creative. If we don't do this, that is something, this is depression, This is collective suicide, which we have now today, but we didn't, find some sort of solution of this collective suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me start 3 things. Yes, I agree. I think that the existence itself, being born, being forced to exist, is something traumatic by nature. And of course, then some people have to deal with many other traumatic experiences as well. And this need to be transformed is something we discussed. Back the second thing you said about the soldier, I think there's a misunderstanding. I never said that and I was never a soldier myself, I traveled with the soldiers. I wanted to commit suicide, quite the opposite. I do believe that the moment you are under attack, there's this desire to be alive with a force that was unknown to me when I was not under attack, of course. But I do believe that the only thing maybe that's the misunderstanding. There was this journalist who said, don't allow yourself to be kidnapped. Mm-hmm. That's worse than dying. And given what we know about being kidnapped in countries like Syria or Afghanistan, he may have had a point as well. But I do believe, of course, that knowing myself, I would hang on to life till the last moment. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what many people would do. And the first thing you said was about the self-destruction. I was referring to something that Coetzee, the author, wrote, that storytelling, not only storytelling what novelists do, but we are all storytellers. We build stories about our lives, is potentially dangerous. And there is, like, in the story itself, is something that can be self-destructive. That often is self-destructive. And you gave a beautiful example that, like, people who don't allow themselves to transform, who repeat the same steps over and over. I think this is a way of being trapped in a story that you cannot escape. That's also an example of self-destruction. And of course, self-destruction doesn't always mean the end of your life, but it means that you harm yourself and others.
Yeah. It's a beautiful conversation between 2 writers here. I hope you'll continue later. There's somebody, 3rd row, there, sir.
Professor Shabani Ali-Sabri, full-time professor in sociology. I have a short question. Is a suicide moral act or functional act? That's all. Thank you.
It depends on the situation. I find it very hard to say in general about all kinds of suicide, whether they're moral acts or not. But suicide can also be an act of resistance, definitely. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Explain.
By not fighting back. Like, of course, some people, like the beautiful example is Korczak, the director of the Jewish orphanage in Warsaw, who could have escaped the camps, but he wanted to stay with his children, and he walked with his children right into the gas chambers because he wanted to be with them till the last minute. He didn't want to let them go alone. Mm-hmm. I would say that this was an act of resistance. It was suicide, but also an act of resistance. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that a society that doesn't try to prevent suicide is not a moral society.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very clear answer to your question. Who else? Up there?
Excuse me. Building on that point, that a society that doesn't want to accept suicide, you mentioned climate change and kind of just passed it on as nothing really happened. But as you know, last week, France had 45.9 degrees. And I saw in the newspaper today, Anchorage, Alaska had 32 degrees Celsius. Are we walking into a nightmare? And I'm thinking particularly about the work of Amitav Ghosh, The Great Derangement. And basically, why has nobody, or particularly authors in the literary field, dealt with climate change?
There are some authors who dealt with it. A German author, Bulgarian-German, Ilya Trojnov wrote a book about it. That's just the first example that comes to my mind. I didn't want to make it sound as if it was just a detail. but it was not a topic of tonight's discussion, and it's such a big topic that it would be almost indecent to reduce it to like a few sentences. Having said this, it's so big that maybe it's too big for a novel. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if it's the time. I mean, I don't feel obliged to write about it, because there's so many other issues that are clearly important as well. And you were using the words collective suicide. Yes, there is a possibility that we are walking blind, or almost blind, into a catastrophe. That's very well possible. But I would also say that if you look at for example, the polls in Germany, where the Green Party is now the biggest party, and if you see what's happening also bit to a lesser degree within the Democratic Party in the US, it's not that people are not talking about it anymore. That's swept under the table, it's swept under the carpet. That's not an issue. I would say it's an issue, but people it's too far away. And if you look at the debates that took place in the Netherlands, where we had elections in March, one of the right-wing parties, extreme right-wing parties, won by basically also making this an issue, by saying that it's a waste of money to pay for it, and that the taxpayers should not pay a penny
for measures
against fighting climate change. Mm-hmm. So certain people feel that it's like, that's too far away. I think the moment when we really see that people are buying houses higher in the hills and the mountains, when the houses in places like Amsterdam, the price of houses are really falling because of the threat of the sea, then we know that it's a big threat, and people will start acting.
In Indonesia, they want to move the capital, Jakarta. They want to create a capital somewhere else because they're afraid that their capital city is going to drown, basically.
Yeah. And one last thing, I have a godson who's 14 years old, and when I speak to him and the people in his class, they all have this feeling that it's too late already. So it doesn't matter anymore. They cannot do anything anymore.
To go back to the main point, maybe we should all start smoking.
That was the main point of tonight.
Maybe that's a very interesting defense of smoking a cigarette, because of climate. Yes.
Yeah. I'm gonna kill myself before the planet goes up in smoke. Yeah. Okay. I see one more hand over here.
Okay, my name is Alma Hasanovic, and I'm the audience. I'm not a writer. I'm wondering, after this discussion, a question, again, I will return to trauma, and what come to my mind is a question of denial of trauma, and how much it's important that you acknowledge that trauma, but when you as a society is faced with constant denial of trauma, how much that is an obstacle to actually acknowledge your trauma and to heal that and to come out from that vicious circle that is caused by this energy of trauma.
Are you referring now to society itself and culture, or to like an individual experience?
Well, I actually refer to, we have now in Bosnia, for example, constant denial of what happened, of genocide, of tortures, of everything that happened in this society. So somehow I believe that this is a really obstacle for coming out and to heal and to take ownership and to make our experience into something that is very creative. Like, for example, what happened after Second World War, I think that Germany fully acknowledged and accepted what has happened, and that was a way out, actually, even for Germany, not for Germany itself, but also for people that were somehow, under.
I understand your question now better. Yes, I do believe that it's very important to examine the past and to examine what happened and to tell the people what happened in order to have a sense of what justice could be. I mean, a complete sense of justice, complete justice is often impossible. And there's a philosopher, Avishai Margalit, who wrote a very interesting book about the question, what's more important, peace or justice? And he says in many cases, peace is more important than this overwhelming sense of justice. But of course, with genocide, the justice is more important. So yeah, I do believe that the denial of what happened in the past is a threat and is dangerous. And often this denial, when I look at Western Europe, comes from the extreme right, who'd like to believe that there is no such a thing as a historical guilt. Because of course the problem is not only that often when you're referring to the denial, to the refusal to look at the past, is that this comes from the refusal to accept what happened, to accept that you're part of a collective guilt, of a system of a country that committed crimes. But also when I said that, one more thing, very small, briefly, I'm not in favor when I said that it's important to acknowledge trauma, that about this therapeutic talk all the time. I do even think that this idea of talking about your pain and talking about your emotions all the time, that somehow became fashionable also through all kinds of therapy, can be counterproductive. It's meant to liberate you from the past and what happened, but often I see that it's turning people into a prisoner, that it's reducing people to pain instead of enabling them to do something with it and to move beyond it at a certain point. So I'm not so much in favor of all these therapeutic dialogue, and sometimes it can be helpful, not by definition against it, but this is not what I meant when I said that we should acknowledge the trauma. That was indeed, I was speaking about culture and society. And one more small thing, Germany did, especially Western Germany, did accept guilt and did amazing things and built the nation, but it was only happened a few decades after World War II. It started in the 70s, really, that they acknowledged what happened and that they said this, we built our state on the notion that this should never happen again. And indeed, it's in the constitution of Germany that the unification of Europe is one of the tasks of Germany, based on the past, based on the fact that 2 world wars started from German soil.
If you will read the book, you will see that Arnon Grunberg excels in absurd images. It reads very lightly. There's black humor, there's even hilarious scenes. It is, as you said, at times breathtakingly funny. And that is why I'm really grateful for you that you took us through the darker, the underlying, the very, very serious themes that go through your work and through this book. And I'm very grateful for you to paying such close attention to this talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I believe Arnon is ready to sign copies of the book and of Tirza if you would like to have them outside.